Power doesn't always wear a suit or shout from a stage. Sometimes it sits in seat 3A, waiting for the world to reveal its own reflection. What unfolded at 30,000 feet would ground more than a plane, it would ground arrogance itself. Like, subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know who's flying with this story. On a cool Tuesday morning at Chicago O'Hare, Malcolm Reddick, a tall, soft-spoken black businessman, stood quietly in line for Pinnacle Airline's Flight 723 to San Francisco. He wore a pressed gray shirt, dark jeans, and worn brown shoes that looked clean but modest. Nothing about him screamed money, yet everything about his posture said confidence. He carried a slim leather case, a tablet tucked under one arm, and an old fountain pen clipped neatly to his front pocket. The boarding gate attendant scanned his ticket, hesitated just a second longer than usual, then smiled a little too wide. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Reddick." Her tone wasn't hostile, but there was something rehearsed about it, like she wasn't used to saying Mr. with that kind of respect to someone who looked like him. Malcolm noticed. He always noticed. He didn't take offense. He took mental notes. He'd been doing that since college, observing how people changed their tone, their body language, their patience based on the color of the man standing in front of them. As he stepped onto the jet bridge, the recycled air hit him cold and metallic. Inside the cabin, the aisle shimmered with overhead lights reflecting off polished seat buckles and brushed metal. First class smelled like espresso and citrus wipes. Gavin Stroud, the chief flight attendant, turned at the sound of footsteps and froze for just half a heartbeat when he saw Malcolm. "Good morning, sir," Gavin said, forcing a smile so tight it could have cracked. "Can I help you find your seat?" "No need," Malcolm said evenly. "It's right here, 3A." He slid into the wide leather seat by the window. Gavin's brow furrowed. "Ah, I see," he said after a pause that lasted too long. "Just verifying. We've had mix-ups before." Malcolm looked up calmly. No mix-up today. Gavin's grin held but didn't reach his eyes. He leaned toward the attendant at the galley and whispered something. The younger attendant glanced at Malcolm, then away quickly. He could feel the silent echo of disbelief. Does he belong here? That question wasn't new to him. It was the hum beneath every polite word. The cabin slowly filled rows of white-collar travelers with expensive watches, corporate badges, and the smug patience of people used to being served first. A woman 2 seats away leaned toward her husband and whispered, "He doesn't look like a regular." Her husband muttered, "Don't start, though," he didn't disagree. Malcolm opened a folded newspaper, pretending to read, but his mind was already in motion. This flight wasn't random. He was flying incognito. As the majority shareholder of Pinnacle Airlines, Malcolm had launched a quiet audit after multiple reports of racial bias surfaced in customer complaints. Some were small passengers being overlooked for upgrades or delayed for random checks, but others were serious false accusations, denied service, verbal disrespect. His board told him it was exaggerated. He disagreed. People don't imagine humiliation, he'd said in the meeting. So here he was alone, anonymous, testing his own company from the inside. 10 minutes into boarding, the seat next to him remained empty. The attendant brought drinks to everyone else, champagne, orange juice, bottled water, but skipped him twice. The small details mattered most. When she finally approached, she said, "Sir, can I get you something to drink?" Her tone balanced between service and suspicion. "Water," he said, still. She nodded, pretending to smile, but the quick glance at his boarding pass again made the insult clear, disbelief disguised as protocol. "Thank you," he said softly, when she returned, placing the glass on the tray table without a word. He didn't need confrontation. He needed observation. Every second of this flight was data, and every prejudice was a performance being documented in real time. What no one knew was that his assistant had already set up automated reporting. Every detail from boarding delays to seat interactions was being logged. The flight's outcome would determine promotions, firings, and policies across the company. Still, Malcolm wasn't here just as an executive. He was here as a man who had lived his entire life with patience mistaken for weakness. The engines whined as the last passengers boarded. The captain's voice came over the intercom, cheerful and bland. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Pinnacle Flight 723. Across the aisle, a heavy-set businessman in a navy blazer caught Gavin's attention. "That seat open?" the man asked, nodding toward Malcolm's row. Gavin hesitated, glancing at Malcolm. "I'll check." The man chuckled. "Figured he might have wandered up here. Happens all the time." Gavin forced a laugh. "Of course, sir." Malcolm didn't move. He didn't even blink. When Gavin returned, he simply said, "That seat's occupied, Mr. Barrow." Barrow smirked. "Just checking." His voice dripped mockery. Malcolm folded his paper neatly and stared straight ahead. He'd faced worse. Doors closed, promotions denied, expectations lowered, but this time humiliation wasn't personal. It was evidence. A few rows back, a young woman raised her phone slightly, pretending to scroll, but secretly recording the exchange. The camera light blinked faintly in reflection against the seat in front of her. Her expression was quiet outrage, someone recognizing unfairness too familiar to name. Malcolm didn't see her, but her recording would become the spark that ignited a storm. Gavin continued down the aisle, avoiding Malcolm's gaze. "All passengers secured," he told the cockpit. Malcolm leaned back, resting his head against the seat. He didn't need to speak to make a statement. The act of remaining simply sitting in the seat he'd earned paid for, and rightfully owned, was defiance enough. As the plane prepared for takeoff, he caught his reflection faintly in the darkened window, a composed black man in a world still uncomfortable with his composure. For most passengers, it was an ordinary business morning. For Malcolm Reddick, it was an unfolding case study in how politeness could hide prejudice as easily as a pressed uniform could hide arrogance. The attendants smiled for every passenger, but each smile carried a tone, an inflection, a small change of energy, depending on who was being served. To Malcolm, it was all data-living evidence of the culture he suspected was infecting his airline. He wasn't new to being underestimated. He'd built his fortune on it. Years ago, when he founded Reddick Capital, investors laughed at the idea of a black CEO running a firm that specialized in high-risk aviation portfolios. They'd told him he lacked the image. "People don't invest in someone who looks like you," one banker had said. Now the same banker's company flew on his planes. Malcolm adjusted his glasses and opened his tablet, pretending to read. Hidden within was an encrypted document marked Observation Log 723. Each crew member's name was already listed, and he quietly tapped notes, Gavin Stroud, tone. Dismissive, microaggressive pause at interaction. Iris Denham. Chom. Double verification of ticket. Avoidance behavior. He didn't need to look up to know Gavin was watching him from the galley, speaking quietly with Iris. He could feel their gaze. They weren't used to being doubted. The irony, he thought, was that they had been reported before. The HR department had documented 3 minor complaints about their professionalism, phrased gently as guest discomfort reports. But somehow all those records had been archived under resolved, no action taken. Malcolm knew why. The supervisor who signed off on those deletions reported directly to one of Pinnacle's board members, a man who valued image over integrity. He'd told Malcolm once, customer perception is everything, even if the perception is wrong. Malcolm remembered that line well. That's why he had initiated this undercover investigation personally. To uncover how deep the rot went, he needed to see it firsthand. And already the signs were loud in their quietness. Gavin passed through the cabin, taking orders. He leaned into the seat of a white woman in 3C, smiling, chatting easily about her destination. When he reached Malcolm, his tone cooled again. "Can I get you anything, Sister Coffee?" Malcolm replied. "Black." Gavin nodded too quickly. "Of course." When the cup arrived, it came without the sugar packets or napkin that every other passenger received. Small details, but telling ones. He logged it silently. The woman in 3C looked over, whispering, "I think they forgot yours." Malcolm smiled faintly. No, they didn't. The captain's voice interrupted, announcing smooth skies and a 40-minute early arrival. Passengers murmured approval. Malcolm barely heard it. His focus was inward. He thought of his late father, a postal worker, who used to say, "You can tell a man's character by how he treats someone he thinks he'll never need." That was the line that built his entire empire. At 54, Malcolm had lived long enough to know that progress was never given. It was taken politely and proven repeatedly. He wasn't bitter, he was deliberate. He opened an internal memo on his tablet, the one he'd sent anonymously 6 weeks ago to the ethics department. It detailed a pattern of systemic courtesy bias across multiple Pinnacle routes. The memo had triggered an internal review and audit team survey pilots and field inspections, but the higher-ups believed it was all theoretical. No evidence of discrimination in current procedures, they'd concluded. So Malcolm removed his name from the documentation, creating a layer of anonymity even his board couldn't trace. He wanted authenticity, not performance. He wanted truth, not reports written to please shareholders. Now sitting quietly in 3A, he was the ghost behind his own investigation, invisible but powerful. Gavin rolled the service cart backward, brushing slightly against Malcolm's knee. "Apologies," he said flatly, then muttered under his breath, "These aisles weren't made for comfort." Malcolm pretended not to hear. He'd learned that reacting gave them what they wanted, confirmation of discomfort. Instead, he studied the man's reflection in the window. Gavin looked like someone who believed he understood order, who deserved control because he'd always had it. The real test of integrity, Malcolm thought, isn't how people behave under command. It's how they behave when they think no one important is watching. 20 minutes later, Iris came by to collect cups. "Sir, are you traveling for work or vacation?" she asked, tone light, but probing. "A little of both," Malcolm replied. "And you?" She laughed, surprised by his directness. "Oh, me, just another day in the sky. Every day reveals something new," he said. The words hung there, meaning more than she realized. She smiled, uncertain, and moved on. Across the aisle, a conversation between two consultants caught his ear. "You hear Pinnacle's getting audited for compliance," one said. "Some big investor triggered it. Guess they're cracking down on bias training." "About time," the other replied. "Heard upper management's nervous." Malcolm kept his eyes forward, lips tightening slightly. So the rumor had started circulating already. Good. The less they knew about who initiated it, the more genuine their reactions would be. The intercom buzzed. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin our in-flight service shortly," Gavin announced, voice calm again. But Malcolm noticed the small glance he gave Iris, the shared smirk that passed between them. To the untrained eye, it was nothing. To him, it was everything. He'd seen that smirk in boardrooms, hotels, even country clubs, the shared language of superiority, disguised as professionalism. Behind it always came exclusion, quiet, but absolute. He stared down at his tablet again. Under observation notes, he added one line. "The disease hides behind a smile." As the cabin dimmed slightly, he leaned back, pretending to rest. But his thoughts were a storm. He wondered how many good people had faced this same silent rejection without the power to change it. They served passengers not by ticket class, but by perceived worth. He knew this because he had built systems to measure human behavior in boardrooms, and what he saw here was the same people disguising superiority behind civility. Just as he began typing another note into his tablet, a shift rippled through the cabin. A commotion at the front. The soft buzz of whispers. The curtain to first class slid open, and through it stepped Clinton Marrow, the CEO of Marrow Technologies, a man whose arrogance was known in every boardroom from Silicon Valley to Manhattan. He was large, loud, and polished in a $7,000 suit that practically announced his arrival. Gavin, who had treated Malcolm with strained politeness, straightened instantly, posture snapping to attention like a soldier saluting a general. "Mr. Marrow," he exclaimed with too much enthusiasm, "we weren't expecting you on this flight." Clinton chuckled, brushing his hand over his silk tie. "Last-minute decision. Just a minute. Had to make a few calls to the airline." The tone said it all. He believed the world rearranged itself for him. Gavin guided him down the aisle, all smiles. Now no hesitation in tone, no second-guessing of status. "Welcome aboard, sir. We'll make sure everything's perfect for you." The contrast was nauseating. Malcolm didn't move. He simply observed the faintest curve of disappointment forming behind his calm exterior. He had met Clinton once before, 2 years ago, in a negotiation where Marrow Technologies had pitched for a merger with one of Reddick Capital's portfolio companies. Clinton had spoken over him the entire meeting, assuming Malcolm was a legal advisor, not the owner. When the truth came out, Clinton's handshake had been stiff, his eyes unrepentant. The deal never happened. Now fate had arranged their reunion 35,000 feet above the Earth in a space designed for civility that would soon collapse into something uglier. Clinton looked down the aisle, saw Malcolm, and froze for a second that betrayed his confusion. He recovered with a grin. "Well, this is something," he said, voice dripping with familiarity. "Didn't expect to see you here." Malcolm's eyes stayed on the window. "Nor I you. Still doing—" Finance, Clinton asked, tone implying a step down, not across. "Something like that." Gavin, sensing the shift, hovered nearby. "Mr. Marrow, I can have seat 3A cleared for you if you'd prefer the window." Clinton smiled a wide show of teeth. "Oh, that'd be great." Malcolm turned his head slowly, meeting Gavin's eyes. "This is my assigned seat?" His voice was calm, but something beneath it made Gavin falter. Clinton chuckled, feigning charm. "It's fine, you can take another. I sit here every Tuesday flight. Routine's important." Gavin nodded eagerly. "Of course, Mr. Marrow, You'll do nothing." Malcolm interrupted quietly. It wasn't loud, but the authority in it froze both men. The passengers around them turned their heads, curious now. Clinton's smile thinned. "Come on, don't make this awkward." Malcolm tilted his head slightly. "It already is." For a moment there was silence, thick and waiting. The woman in 3C glanced nervously between them. Clinton's jaw tightened, and Gavin fidgeted with his uniform collar. Sir Gavin began, his voice returning to that falsely professional pitch. "Perhaps we can accommodate you elsewhere." "No," Malcolm said. "You'll accommodate the policy you're paid to follow." His tone was deliberate, measured. Clinton laughed without humor. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Malcolm didn't blink. "I know what kind of man you are." The line landed like a blade, clean, sharp, final. Clinton's expression hardened. He leaned close, voice dropping to a hiss. "You really want to play this game?" Malcolm replied, eyes steady. "I don't play, I own." The air changed. Everyone felt it. Gavin stepped back, caught between his training and his bias. Iris appeared from the galley, her voice too bright. "Gentlemen, let's keep things calm. Mr. Marrow, can I offer you champagne while we sort this out?" Clinton grinned at her, taking the glass before it even touched the tray. "Now that—" "Service," he said loudly, making sure Malcolm heard. Iris smiled uncomfortably. "Of course, sir." She turned to Malcolm, adding softly, "We're just trying to make everyone comfortable." "You're succeeding," he said dryly. "Some more than others." She didn't respond, only walked away quickly. The businessman across the aisle whispered to his seatmate, "I'd have moved. Not worth the trouble?" His seatmate replied, "He shouldn't have to." The whisper carried. Clinton caught it and sneered. "You people love a scene," he said under his breath. Malcolm's eyes flicked toward him, voice low. "Careful." Clinton shrugged, unbothered. "Just saying some of us earned our seats." Malcolm leaned slightly closer, his tone like steady thunder. "And some of us built the plane." Clinton stared at him, uncomprehending for a second before turning away, muttering something about overreacting. Gavin, desperate to restore control, said, "Gentlemen, we can't." But Malcolm cut him off. "You've done enough. Go do your job." Gavin opened his mouth to protest, but stopped. There was something in Malcolm's eyes that told him arguing would be unwise. The rest of the flight sat in uneasy quiet. Conversations muted. The air felt heavier. 30 minutes passed before Clinton finally broke the silence, speaking loudly to a woman behind him. "You ever notice how touchy people get when you ask for what's yours?" The woman didn't answer. The encounter had drawn enough attention that everyone in first class pretended not to look at him. Yet every movement he made pulled their peripheral gaze like gravity. Gavin Stroud and Iris Denholm whispered by the galley, debating their next move. "We can't let this escalate," Iris said quietly. "It already did," Gavin muttered. That man's trouble. I can tell. He's calm, she replied. Too calm, Gavin snapped. His voice carried, and Malcolm heard it, though he gave no sign. Calmness always unsettled people who were used to control. It suggested intelligence calculation, patience, all the things bigotry feared most when it realized it had been witnessed. 10 minutes passed, the plane cruising at altitude, when Gavin decided to reassert dominance. He approached Malcolm's seat with a forced managerial smile. Sir, I want to make sure everything's okay. He began tone-honeyed, but brittle. Everything's fine, Malcolm said, not looking up. Good Gavin continued because we want all our guests to feel comfortable. Maybe moving to another seat would help keep the peace. The phrasing was careful corporate, but the message was the same. You're the problem. Malcolm finally looked at him, eyes steady. No anger, just truth. You're asking the wrong person to move, he said. Gavin's composure faltered. Sir, I'm simply you're offering a solution to your discomfort, not mine. The words landed soft but deep, and the attendant behind Gavin shifted uneasily. Malcolm leaned back. Tell me something, he added. If I were the one asking someone else to move, would you be negotiating or obeying? Gavin's jaw tightened. It's always about something, Malcolm interrupted. And in this case, it's about image, isn't it? Gavin blinked, taken aback by how precise the accusation was. Malcolm turned his gaze to the aisle, speaking as if to no one. You've built a culture where respect is a courtesy, not a policy. Then, in a tone almost conversational, and you're about to learn what that costs. Gavin's throat went dry. Before he could respond, Iris appeared beside him. Smile strained. Sir, please. She said we can't have conflict mid-flight. Malcolm nodded. Then don't create one. The woman in 3C subtly filmed again, her phone angled discreetly. The red light blinked once, capturing the tension. The white attendant towering the black passenger composed the quiet imbalance of power laid bare in one frame. Iris noticed the phone and frowned. Ma'am, please, no recording. But it was too late. The clip was already uploading to social media through the plane's Wi-Fi seconds, ticking into virality, before the aircraft even reached cruising altitude. Down on the ground, a digital spark had been lit. Within 8 minutes, the short video captioned, "Man asked to move from first class for no reason. #seat 3A began trending regionally. By the 15th minute, it hit national feed visibility. Hashtags multiplied like wildfire, #flying, while black hash, Pinnacle BS, #3A. And within 20 minutes, Pinnacle's own PR department received a dozen media inquiries. By 25 minutes, the airline's gate desk got a call from corporate headquarters. What the hell happened on 723? A voice demanded. Keep the situation calm. No removal, no headlines. But in the air, none of that control existed yet. Iris leaned toward Gavin. Corporate's going to see this. Not if I fix it first, he hissed. He turned back toward Malcolm. Sir, I'm giving you one last opportunity to cooperate before this becomes a formal refusal to comply. Malcolm smiled faintly. Is that a threat or an education? It's a warning, Gavin said. You're refusing a crew request. A request based on what Malcolm asked evenly. My behavior or your assumption? On maintaining order, Gavin replied. I'm maintaining order, Malcolm said. You're disturbing it. His tone was so composed that Gavin almost stepped back. The passengers around them stared, now silent witnesses, to an unspoken truth. Every rule sounded different, depending on who it was spoken to. Iris, seeing Gavin's temper rising, stepped between them. Gavin, she whispered, don't. Just let it go. You saw how he talked to me, Gavin said. We can't have him dictating what's right. Malcolm interjected quietly. You're confusing authority with integrity. Gavin turned to him. You think you know everything, huh? No, Malcolm said. Just enough to know when I'm being tested. Iris stepped back, realizing the argument was spiraling. She turned to the other attendant. Get the captain, she whispered. But before that could happen, Malcolm reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. For my safety, he said, tapping record. Since you like procedures, I'll make sure this one's transparent. Gavin froze, half a dozen thoughts colliding in his head company policy authority reputation. The small camera lens felt like a mirror pointed at guilt. "You can't, I can," Malcolm said, "and you can thank your union for that right." The cabin went silent. Even Clinton Marrow, now watching with a smirk, said nothing. "Fine," Gavin muttered finally. "Do what you want." He turned sharply and stormed back toward the galley, muttering about ungrateful passengers. Iris followed, her nerves unraveling. She whispered, "You need to calm down." "He's baiting me," Gavin said. "You think he's just some random guy he's provoking us?" Iris's voice dropped lower. "He's recording you, Gavin. That's the whole point. Just stay quiet." "No," Gavin snapped, slamming a tray onto the counter. "People like him always play the victim." His words landed hard, the last ones, before the silence that followed. Iris looked at him in disbelief. "Did you hear yourself?" she asked quietly. Gavin said nothing, but the realization crept across his face. He turned back toward the aisle and saw the passengers staring, all of them having heard. Iris whispered, "Congratulations. You just buried your career at 35,000 feet." The rest of the flight dragged under that cloud of uneasy awareness. Gavin didn't approach Malcolm again. He didn't have to. The damage was done. Down on the ground, Pinnacle's PR lead was scrambling to contain a story that hadn't even officially happened yet. Calls were being made to the captain, emails flying between legal departments, and the CEO himself had been notified of a developing customer relations situation. But above it all, Malcolm sat quietly in 3A, a man who understood power not as noise but as patience. He knew that once truth entered the air, it traveled faster than any jet. The irony wasn't lost on him. His airline had always bragged about speed, yet it couldn't outrun its own reflection. "He's recording us," Gavin whispered harshly. "If we don't assert control, we look weak." Iris shot back, "If you touch him, you'll look finished." Meanwhile, Malcolm Reddick sat in 3A, calm and unmoved. His phone, still recording, rested quietly on his tray table. He was aware of the tension, aware of the eyes that kept darting toward him and away again, but his patience was not performative. It was deliberate, a mirror to expose how chaos was born, not from the oppressed, but from those afraid of losing power. The intercom buzzed, with the captain's voice breaking the silence. "Cabin crew, please report to the forward station." Gavin straightened his tie and glanced towards the cockpit. He turned to Iris. "He's getting removed," he said. Iris frowned. "Are you serious?" "Protocol," Gavin muttered, and marched forward before she could stop him. The captain, a gray-haired veteran named Miles Corrin, met him near the cockpit door. "Corporate," called Miles, said quietly. "What's happening with seat 3? Gavin puffed his chest. "Passenger refuses to comply with crew requests. Disruptive attitude." The captain's brow furrowed. "Was there aggression?" "Not yet," Gavin said, "but it's escalating." Miles sighed. "You sure about this?" "I'm sure," Gavin said confidently. "We can't let him film us and dictate the rules." The captain hesitated, then picked up the intercom. "Officer Hammond, report to gate control, passenger removal authorization pending." That was all it took. The decision made in seconds would soon ripple through the entire airline. Back in first class, the quiet broke as the plane began descending toward an unplanned stop in Kansas City for a medical and safety concern. Malcolm's eyes opened slowly. He understood the maneuver immediately. They weren't ejecting him for misconduct, they were masking it behind procedure. He tapped his phone, saving the recording to an encrypted folder connected to his assistant's cloud network. The backup uploaded automatically. Then he sat upright, hands folded neatly in his lap. When Iris walked by, her expression betrayed unease. "Sir," she said softly, "there's been a situation. We may have to make a quick landing." "For me?" he asked. She hesitated. "I can't say that." "You just did," Malcolm replied. She looked around nervously. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't agree with it." He gave her a small nod. "Then don't apologize. Integrity doesn't need permission." Minutes later, the plane descended smoothly, touching down under the pretext of a minor safety issue. Passengers whispered, uneasy but curious. 2 uniformed security officers boarded the taller one. Officer Brent Callahan stepped forward with the practiced authority of someone used to obedience. His partner, Officer Reed Donnelly, followed his expression less certain. Gavin met them at the front, gesturing toward 3A. That's him. Brent looked over eyes, scanning the composed man in the gray shirt. What's the issue? Gavin kept his voice low, refused to move seats, recorded the crew, creating a disturbance. Brent frowned. That's it. Policy says we can remove anyone for non-compliance, Gavin insisted. Brent exhaled, unimpressed, but unwilling to argue mid-duty. He approached Malcolm's seat. Sir, he said, voice polite but firm. We need to ask you to come with us. Malcolm looked up steady. My captain's orders, Brent replied. For what violation, Malcolm asked. Crew's authority was challenged, Brent said, hesitating. Malcolm tilted his head. Authority can't be challenged if it was never legitimate to begin with. Brent shifted uncomfortably. Sir, please stand. Iris stepped closer, quietly, whispering, Gavin, stop this. He's calm. He's not resisting. Gavin hissed. He's undermining us. But before the officers could move closer, another voice cut through the cabin. Excuse me, said a woman in row 5. It was Tessa Ward, a young off-duty flight attendant traveling home. She stood up holding her employee ID. That's not a removable offense, she said clearly. Policy states that seat reassignment is only permitted for safety, not preference. Everyone turned toward her. The officers hesitated. Miss, please sit down, Brent warned. No, she said firmly, not until someone checks Company Code 14.7 seat reassignment guidelines. It's in the employee manual. Iris's eyes widened. She knew Tessa was right. Malcolm remained silent, but the faintest smile touched his lips. The quiet power of truth had entered the room. Gavin, now sweating, barked, This is crew business, then follow crew rules. Tessa snapped. You're violating one. The tension snapped like a stretched cable. Passengers began murmuring some recording again, others openly questioning why a calm man was being escorted off a plane. Brent stepped back, pulling out his radio. Dispatch, verify passenger Reddick Malcolm. Repeat, Malcolm Reddick. There was a pause. Static filled the cabin. Then a voice came through, confirmed. Wait, standby? Repeat, standby. Brent frowned. Another pause, then abort removal. Passenger has executive-level clearance, flagged under owner's account. The cabin froze. Say again? Brent asked. The voice came back slower this time. You're attempting to remove an executive shareholder. He's on the protected list. Every head turned toward Malcolm. Gavin's face drained of color. Iris looked like she'd seen a ghost. Malcolm, calm as ever, reached into his pocket and handed Brent a small black card, sleek unmarked, except for the company logo, and a gold-embossed line that read, Executive Access. Brent took it, eyes widening, as the system on his handheld confirmed the identity match. Sir, he said, voice suddenly reverent, you're Mr. Reddick. Malcolm nodded slightly. I am. Silence rippled through the cabin. Clinton Marrow, who had been smirking in his seat the entire time, sat up straighter, his confidence dissolving. You own Pinnacle, he stammered. Malcolm looked over at him briefly. Own isn't the right word, he said softly. I built it. Brent turned toward Gavin, anger creeping into his tone. You didn't tell us who he was. Gavin's lips trembled. I didn't know. You should have, Brent replied. It's your job. He handed the card back to Malcolm, voice respectful now. My apologies, sir. There will be no further issue. Malcolm took the card and placed it on the tray table. There already was an issue, he said. You just realized who it affected. Brent nodded slowly. Understood, sir. Then lowering his voice, we'll file this correctly. He and Reed backed away, their authority evaporating. Gavin stood frozen in the aisle, pale and silent. Tessa sat down again, folding her arms, satisfied. Iris approached Malcolm hesitantly. Mr. Reddick, she said softly. I didn't know. I truly didn't. Malcolm's gaze softened for her. I believe you, he said. Then, louder to the cabin, "No one needs to apologize for ignorance, just correct it when it's revealed." Gavin Stroud, who had led the charge to remove him, stood frozen near the galley, his authority shattered. Iris Denham sat stiffly in the jump seat, eyes downcast, aware that her career had just hinged on her restraint. Officer Brent Callahan and his partner had already deboarded before takeoff, muttering apologies to headquarters. But Malcolm wasn't thinking about them. His mind had already shifted from humiliation to reconstruction. When people wronged him, he didn't react. He rebuilt the rules around them. He adjusted his seat, took a quiet sip of water, and looked out the window. The sky was endless, a pale expanse of light that reminded him of the first time he'd flown on a company he didn't yet own. Back then, he was just a young consultant with an idea no one believed in, that transportation wasn't just about movement, it was about dignity. Dignity was what made an airline trustworthy. And now the same company that bore his name had betrayed that idea publicly. He would fix that, permanently. Iris cleared her throat softly, unable to stand the silence. "Mr. Reddick," she said, "would you like something to drink?" He turned toward her, his tone gentle but exact. "I'd like accountability," he said. She blinked at a loss for words. "I don't mean from you," he added, easing the tension slightly. "You showed restraint when others didn't." She nodded relief, flickering across her face. Gavin, standing behind her, took a step forward. "Sir," he began, "I'd like to apologize." Malcolm didn't look at him. "You'd like to survive," he said evenly. "There's a difference." Gavin swallowed hard. "I made a mistake. You made a series of them," Malcolm said. "And worse, you thought authority excused them." The tone wasn't loud, but it was surgical, each word dissecting pride. Gavin's face went pale. "I didn't know who you were." "That's the point," Malcolm said. "You shouldn't have to." The conversation ended there. He leaned back, hands folded, his demeanor unshaken. The cabin was silent, except for the drone of the engines. Across the aisle, Clinton Marrow watched with unease, his earlier arrogance replaced by quiet self-preservation. He finally spoke up, his voice softer than before. "Didn't mean any offense earlier," he said. Malcolm turned his head slightly, just enough to meet his eyes. "You meant every word," he replied, "but I forgive what you didn't understand." Clinton nodded quickly, looking down. The hierarchy had shifted entirely, money bowed to principle. 10 minutes later, a flight attendant hurried from the cockpit to Malcolm's seat. "Sir, the vice president of Pinnacle Airlines is on the ground. He's requested to board at our Kansas City stop. Says it's urgent." Malcolm nodded once. "Let him." The plane rerouted briefly, descending toward Kansas City International. As they taxied, tension rippled again. No one spoke. The passengers knew something larger was unfolding, something that would reach far beyond a single flight. The cabin door opened, and a man in his late 40s with a loosened tie and sweat on his brow climbed aboard Jonas Faircroft Pinnacle's Vice President of Operations. His arrival was unannounced, his urgency visible in every step. "Mr. Reddick," he said breathlessly, "I came as soon as I heard. Malcolm didn't stand. He didn't need to." "You came because you realized who you humiliated," he said calmly. "There's a difference." Jonas swallowed his hands, trembling slightly. "Sir, this was a grave misunderstanding. The crew wasn't aware that I was their employer," Malcolm cut in. "Yes, I'm aware. That's why I boarded this flight incognito, to see how they treat passengers without a title protecting them." The words struck harder than anger could. Jonas adjusted his jacket nervously. "We're deeply sorry. I've already contacted corporate too. You've contacted PR." Malcolm interrupted. "There's a difference between repairing image and repairing culture." The man froze, realizing he'd stepped into a conversation that wasn't for his comfort. Malcolm leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, voice steady. "Do you know how many complaints this airline dismissed for tone, for attitude, for crew discretion? Do you know how many of them came from people who looked like me?" Jonas opened his mouth, but found no words. "You buried the truth," Malcolm continued, "because you were afraid of headlines. Well, congratulations, you have them now." Jonas's face was pale. "What do you want us to do?" Sir Malcolm's tone softened, but his words did not. Ground the problem before it grounds you. Jonas nodded quickly. Understood. We'll start internal reviews immediately. Malcolm studied him for a moment, then said no. I'll start them. You'll implement them. The distinction hung heavy in the air. Jonas straightened. Of course, Mr. Reddick. Iris looked on quietly, a strange mix of respect and remorse in her expression. Gavin stood farther back, pale and silent, wishing he could disappear. Clinton, still pretending to work on his laptop, peeked over the screen like a guilty child. Jonas cleared his throat. There's something else, sir, he said. The FAA has been monitoring online activity related to this incident. They've contacted us already. Malcolm raised an eyebrow. Have they? Jonas nodded. Apparently one of their field inspectors was on this flight. Seat 1B. Malcolm turned his head slightly towards the front of the cabin. There, in the first row, sat a man with a calm expression, a silver badge faintly visible under his jacket pocket. The inspector met his gaze, nodding once in acknowledgement. I've been watching quietly, he said. You handled this with remarkable restraint, Mr. Reddick. Malcolm's expression didn't change. You mean I didn't give them the out they wanted? The inspector's lips curved faintly. That too. He leaned forward. You should know that this report won't vanish into corporate hands. I'm filing it directly to Federal Review. Jonas blanched. That's not necessary. It's overdue. Malcolm interrupted. And if the FAA wants to evaluate systemic bias in air service, they'll have my full cooperation. The inspector nodded respectfully. Good. It's time someone with power cared. Then he leaned back, pulling out a small notepad and writing something down. Jonas looked around helplessly, realizing the damage was beyond containment. Mr. Reddick, he said finally, I can't undo what happened. No, Malcolm replied, but you can decide what happens next. The engines roared as the plane prepared for takeoff again. Jonas stayed standing until Malcolm gestured for him to sit in the empty seat beside him. You'll ride the rest of this flight, Malcolm said. You'll watch how your employees behave when they realize who's watching. Jonas nodded, silent. As they lifted into the air once more, Malcolm leaned back and spoke quietly, not to Jonas, but to himself. I built this airline to connect people, not separate them. If it fails that purpose, then it doesn't deserve my name. The inspector in 1B overheard and smiled faintly. Outside, the clouds stretched across the horizon, bright and unbroken. The balance of power had shifted entirely. The passengers sensed it too, the calm authority of justice replacing the shallow order of privilege. Gavin didn't move for the remainder of the flight. He knew he'd already written his own resignation letter through his actions. Iris, on the other hand, walked through the cabin with quiet professionalism, serving everyone equally this time. Across the aisle, Iris Denham moved through the cabin with a precision born of fear and newfound humility, her every motion measured, careful not to draw attention. Gavin Stroud remained by the galley, red-eyed and silent, whispering short replies to the intercom whenever the captain called for updates, and at the front of the cabin, the FAA inspector in 1B continued jotting notes, occasionally glancing toward Malcolm, as though witnessing something far larger than a single corporate scandal. Malcolm didn't speak for the first 20 minutes of flight. He stared out the window, the clouds rushing below him in slow rivers of white. For the first time that morning, he felt something more than anger. He felt exhaustion, the kind that only came from a lifetime of holding composure in rooms that weren't built for men like him. But then he noticed something strange. A faint amber streak running along the left wing, shimmering briefly as sunlight caught it. At first he thought it was a reflection, but as the plane banked slightly, the color darkened, pooling in a thin, uneven line. He leaned forward slightly, squinting instincts sharpened by years of observation. Something was wrong. He unbuckled his seatbelt and waved Iris over. "Miss Denholm," he said calmly. "Can you have maintenance check the left wing for fluid leakage?" Iris blinked. "Sir, we're mid-flight. There's nothing visible from inside." "I can see it," he said firmly. She leaned closer to look through his window, but the streak had faded slightly as the sunlight shifted. "I don't see anything now," she said. It's there, Malcolm replied, tone quiet but absolute. Amber in color. It's not condensation, it's hydraulic. Iris hesitated. Are you sure completely? He said. She hesitated again, torn between duty and doubt. Jonas, overhearing the exchange, leaned closer. You think there's a leak? I know there is, Malcolm said. And if I'm right, we shouldn't be in the air right now. Jonas swallowed, looking toward the cockpit. Captain Corrin should be notified. Iris bit her lip. If it's nothing, and if it's something Malcolm interrupted. She froze, the logic undeniable. Do it quietly, he said. No panic, just report what I saw. Iris nodded quickly and walked briskly to the front. The passengers hardly noticed as she disappeared behind the cockpit door. Jonas turned to Malcolm. You really think it's that serious? Malcolm didn't look away from the window. The hydraulic system controls landing gear flaps and brakes. If the leak's what I think it is, the system could fail completely before descent. Jonas's face drained of color. You just saved me from a headline we wouldn't survive, he said. Malcolm didn't answer. 10 minutes passed before Iris returned, her face pale but composed. You were right, she said softly. The captain confirmed a pressure drop in the left hydraulic system. He's contacting air traffic control for emergency clearance. Jonas stared at her. You're serious? Dead serious, she whispered. They're preparing for a return. Gavin appeared from the galley, panic rising. What's happening? Iris turned toward him. There's a hydraulic leak. We're diverting. His face went white. You're kidding. Do I look like I'm kidding? She snapped. Gavin glanced at Malcolm, the realization sinking in like a cold stone. The man he'd humiliated, questioned, and nearly ejected had just saved every soul on the aircraft. The intercom crackled to life. Captain Corrin's voice filled the cabin, steady but tense. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've detected a minor mechanical issue, and we'll be making a precautionary landing at St. Louis International. Please remain calm and seated. This is a standard safety procedure. The passengers exchanged anxious looks. Clinton Marrow shifted nervously, muttering, "Minor issue, my ass." The plane banked, slightly lowering altitude. Jonas exhaled shakily, whispering, "If that leak had gone unnoticed." It didn't, Malcolm said. He closed his eyes briefly, silently. Calculating. The pressure loss at this stage likely meant one of the secondary seals had failed, probably near the actuator line. He'd studied aircraft engineering decades ago when investing in Pinnacle's design division. He knew what hydraulic failure meant. Total loss of control in the final minutes of descent. Iris knelt beside his seat, voice low. Captain asked if you'd come forward after landing. He wants to thank you. Malcolm shook his head. Tell him to thank his mechanic instead. They'll need to inspect every aircraft with the same configuration before the next flight leaves the ground. She nodded, still pale. Gavin, trembling slightly, whispered, "You saw it from your window." "Yes," Malcolm said, "because I was sitting where I belonged." The words were quiet, but powerful enough to make Gavin lower his head in shame. Outside, the world below grew larger patchworks of land and light coming into focus. The descent was steady, the engines low and humming. Jonas wiped his forehead. You may have just saved this company from more than embarrassment. Malcolm looked at him. You mean from disaster? From both, Jonas admitted. The plane landed smoothly, the wheels kissing the runway with a jolt softer than expected. Applause rippled through the cabin, that nervous kind of relief people share when they realize how close they came to the edge without knowing it. Malcolm didn't clap. He simply exhaled slowly, eyes still on the wing. Emergency vehicles lined the tarmac. As the plane rolled to a stop, mechanics in orange vests approached, inspecting the left side. One crouched under the wing, wiping his glove along the metal, then lifted it slick with amber fluid. He gestured sharply to the others. Iris turned toward Malcolm again. You were right, she said. One of them just signaled for a containment crew. Jonas unbuckled his seatbelt, trembling. You caught it before the system failed. 40 more minutes and you'd have been reading about us instead of sitting here, Malcolm finished. You owe that to awareness, not luck. Clinton, unable to contain himself, muttered, "Guess I should say thank you." Malcolm looked at him with a calm that burned deeper than anger. "You should say nothing at all." Clinton nodded, shrinking back into silence. Gavin walked up, voice barely audible. "Sir," he said, "I don't expect forgiveness." Malcolm didn't turn. "Then don't ask for it." He paused, then added, "Learn from it." Gavin lowered his gaze and stepped away. Outside, the mechanics worked fast. Jonas leaned toward Malcolm, voice quiet. "When this reaches the press, and it's going to look like divine intervention." "No," Malcolm said. "It'll look like accountability." Jonas hesitated, then nodded. The FAA inspector rose from 1B, walking to where Malcolm sat. "Mr. Reddick," he said, "I'll be adding this to my report. It changes the story entirely. You didn't just uncover bias, you prevented a tragedy." The emergency landing in St. Louis sent shockwaves that reached far beyond the runway, while mechanics swarmed around Flight 723 draining fluid, replacing lines and ceiling connections. The cabin door opened to flashing lights and murmuring crowds. Passengers stepped out pale, but grateful, clutching phones that had already captured pieces of history. Malcolm Reddick stood last to leave unhurried, as if he knew the next steps of this storm before anyone else could imagine them. Jonas Faircroft followed closely, trying to manage the ground team's questions, but no one listened. Reporters were already gathering outside the terminal, tipped off by a viral headline, "Passenger saves Flight 723 after confrontation with crew turns out." He owns the airline. Malcolm didn't flinch when the cameras found him. He walked straight through the terminal in his gray shirt and worn brown shoes, no entourage, no announcement. His silence spoke louder than any statement could. Behind him, Jonas whispered into his phone, voice trembling. "Yes, it's true. He's here. Yes, he saw the leak. Yes, he's the majority shareholder. No, this wasn't planned. But by then, control was gone. The internet had already rewritten the narrative. Within an hour, #Seat3A trended globally, paired with the hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack, and hundreds of thousands of people were sharing clips of Malcolm's quiet defiance. The video from the woman in 3C had racked up 4 million views, and its caption, "He didn't raise his voice once," became the heartbeat of the story. Major news networks picked it up before lunch. By afternoon, every major outlet from CNN to Reuters ran a headline linking Pinnacle Airlines to both discrimination and safety negligence. The two threads wove together like a noose, tightening around the company's neck. Malcolm sat in a quiet airport lounge while the chaos unfolded around him. He sipped a cup of black coffee calm, while Jonas stood nearby pacing, juggling phone calls from PR Legal and the board. "They want to issue a statement," Jonas said breathlessly. "Apology, explanation, commitment to transparency, the usual." Malcolm didn't look up. "They want to protect themselves, not the passengers." "We can fix this," Jonas pleaded. "We just need to get ahead of it." Malcolm set the cup down and finally looked him in the eye. "You don't get ahead of the truth," he said. "You follow it until it stops running." Jonas didn't respond. He knew this wasn't just about optics anymore. It was about consequence. Meanwhile, in Washington, FAA regulators held an emergency conference call. One of the inspectors from St. Louis had already filed a full report, citing a systemic breakdown of protocol tied to discriminatory decision-making and maintenance oversight. The term bias-linked safety failure appeared in an FAA document for the first time. That phrase alone would send boardrooms into panic for months to come. Malcolm received the news from the inspector in 1B, who approached quietly, handing him a printed copy of the preliminary report. "This will become public in 24 hours, the man said. "Are you ready for that?" Malcolm glanced at the paper, but didn't read it. "I've been ready for 30 years, he said. "I just waited for the world to catch up." As evening fell, Jonas returned with his phone pressed to his ear. "Sir, corporate wants to know your official position before they release anything. They're drafting an internal memo. They're terrified of your reaction." "They should be," Malcolm replied. Tell them I'll be addressing the public directly. They can respond afterward." Jonas's eyes widened. "Directly as in press conference, as in truth," Malcolm said. The next morning, the world woke to a live broadcast from the same terminal where Flight 723 had landed. The camera lights reflected in Malcolm's calm expression. Behind him stood rows of journalists' microphones extended like drawn weapons, and in front of him sat passengers from the flight, including Iris Tessa Jonas, and even Gavin, who had been ordered by corporate to appear publicly for accountability. Malcolm didn't bring notes. He didn't need them. Yesterday, he began Voice Steady. A flight under my company's name was nearly destroyed by both mechanical failure and moral failure. Both could have been prevented. Both were ignored. He let the words hang in the air, the silence as intentional as the speech. For years, I've read reports about racial bias in our service complaints dismissed as exaggerations. Yesterday, I didn't read about it. I lived it. And when I saw something wrong outside that window, something my own crew dismissed as unimportant, it wasn't just a leak on a wing. It was a reflection of how this company operates. We ignore what makes us uncomfortable until it puts lives at risk. Cameras clicked furiously. Jonas stood off to the side, shifting nervously. Malcolm continued. "I'm grounding every Pinnacle aircraft until each one passes a complete safety and ethics inspection. Not just for mechanical flaws, but for cultural ones. Every pilot attendant and executive will go through retraining. Every report ever buried will be reopened. We will not fly until we can prove that every seat, no matter who sits in it, is treated with the same dignity." The crowd erupted in questions. "Mr. Reddick, what about the shareholders?" one reporter shouted. "I'm their problem now," he replied. "If they value profit over people, they can sell their shares. This company will no longer fly on prejudice or complacency." Another reporter called out, "Are you saying the crew acted with racism?" Malcolm's eyes fixed on her. "I'm saying they acted with the assumption that power has a color, and I intend to remove that assumption permanently." Behind him, Iris's eyes filled with tears. Gavin stood stone still, realizing that no apology could cleanse what the world had already seen. Tessa, sitting among the passengers, nodded quietly, her earlier courage now vindicated. Jonas stepped forward after the questions died down, whispering, "The board's panicking. Stocks are dropping 20 points. Let them," Malcolm said. "Integrity always costs something. It's about time they paid." Within hours, the market responded just as Jonas feared. Pinnacle's stock fell 12%, then 18%, then 25% by closing. But what surprised analysts wasn't the drop, it was the surge of public support. Messages flooded social media praising Malcolm's decision to ground the fleet. Customers canceled flights, yes, but they replaced their anger with respect. For the first time in years, a CEO wasn't hiding behind apologies. He was dismantling the foundation that had caused them. By that evening, Malcolm sat alone in his hotel room overlooking the runway. The grounded planes lined up like silent soldiers, each reflecting the amber glow of the sunset. He watched them, remembering his first aircraft investment decades earlier, when every decision was about expansion, not reflection. Now the pause felt necessary, almost sacred. His phone buzzed a call from Washington. It was the FAA director herself. "Mr. Reddick," she said, "you've made history. Your grounding order forced every other airline to review its bias and maintenance protocols. You understand this will change federal procedure." "Good," he said. "That's what systems are for changing. You'll face hearings," she added. "Critics will say you overstepped." Shareholders panicked, unions prepared lawsuits, and rival airlines released hollow statements about reaffirming their values. But within the storm, Malcolm was calm. He had seen men like these before, men who thrived on panic and used fear as fuel. What they didn't understand was that his silence was power. He wasn't reacting. He was planning the rebuild. In a conference suite overlooking the grounded fleet, Malcolm stood before 20 executives, lawyers, and department heads. The blinds were open, sunlight pouring through, as if to spotlight the truth that could no longer be hidden. "You all know why we're here," he said, voice steady but carrying the weight of command. We have two choices: bury this and die slowly, or rebuild and live with dignity. No one spoke. Some avoided his gaze. Others glanced at Jonas Faircroft, who sat near the end of the table, hands clasped tightly. Malcolm continued pacing slowly. This company forgot why it existed. Somewhere between policy and profit, we began to treat people like interruptions to our image. That ends today. He tapped the table, and a digital screen lit up behind him, displaying the title, "The Dignity Protocol," in bold gray letters. Effective immediately, he said every employee from executive to entry level will complete equity, ethics, and empathy training overseen by an independent task force. The structure will be public. Transparency will be mandatory. No hidden memos, no buried complaints, no private settlements. Every report will be published quarterly. Murmurs rippled through the room. The legal head, a balding man named Peterson, raised a hand nervously. "Sir, this could expose us to lawsuits." Malcolm turned toward him. "Then maybe we deserve them?" The room fell silent again. "Accountability doesn't destroy a company," he said. "Pretending it doesn't need it does." He clicked the remote again. Second Pinnacle will implement anonymous feedback from passengers and employees alike, collected and reviewed by a non-corporate team. If anyone is mistreated racially, verbally, or otherwise, their report goes straight to oversight, not through chain of command. You don't filter truth through hierarchy. Jonas nodded, slowly, still pale. And Third Malcolm said, his tone softening, "We will give our employees a chance to prove they can rise above their mistakes." He paused, letting hope flicker, before continuing. "But those who can't will leave." The implication was clear. Iris lowered her head, guilt written across her face. Gavin wasn't in the room. He had been suspended immediately after the landing, pending review. Malcolm had personally ensured that decision was final before sunrise. "This isn't revenge," Malcolm said. "It's restoration." He turned to Jonas. "You'll oversee restructuring, but I'm not asking for compliance. I'm asking for courage." Jonas nodded. "You'll have it, sir." "Not from fear," Malcolm added, from conviction. As the meeting ended, he stayed behind, while others filed out, whispering among themselves about impossible timelines and board approval. He looked out the window, watching the motionless planes shimmer in the morning sun, row after row of silver bodies waiting for redemption. He whispered under his breath, "They'll fly again, but only when they deserve to." Hours later, he met privately with Tessa Ward in the employee lounge. She stood nervously, hands clasped still in her Navy travel jacket. "Mr. Reddick," she began, "I wasn't expecting." "You should have," he interrupted, not unkindly. "You stood when others sat. You spoke when silence was easier." "That's leadership." She blinked, unsure if she should smile. "I was just doing what was right." "Exactly," he said. "That's why you're the new director of culture reform." Her jaw dropped. "Sir, I'm not qualified." "You're human," Malcolm said. "That's the qualification." Tears welled in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me," he said. "Thank yourself for not waiting for permission to act decent." He handed her a folder labeled Internal Ethics Division Confidential. Inside were plans for a company-wide retraining system, whistleblower protection forms, and her official promotion letter, signed that morning. She clutched it to her chest, nodding firmly. "I won't let you down," she said. "Then don't let yourself down," he replied, offering a rare smile. Later that day, Jonas delivered final HR reports. Gavin Stroud and Iris Denholm were both terminated, effective immediately, he said quietly. "Per your orders." Malcolm took the folder, glanced through the paperwork, and nodded. "Did Iris contest?" No, Jonas said. "She just said she was sorry." "Then she'll learn," Malcolm murmured. And Gavin Jonas hesitated. He called it unfair, said he was being punished for misunderstanding, not misconduct. Malcolm's eyes darkened. Misunderstanding ends when it hurts people. He'll understand that now. Jonas sighed, exhausted. "We've also received hundreds of public emails, customers, employees, even competitors. They're calling your speech historic." Malcolm didn't smile. History only matters if it changes what comes next. Jonas handed him another document. "The FAA hearings are set for Friday. They want you to testify. "I'll be there," Malcolm said. "And when I'm done, so will they." Jonas nodded and left. Alone in the office, Malcolm opened a new file on his tablet, titled Restructuring Roadmap. The first line read, "Every company has two pilots, profit and purpose. One will always try to fly higher, but the other decides if it lands safely." He stared at the line for a long moment, then began writing. As the hours passed, the sun dipped low, streaking the sky in gold. Down on the tarmac, workers were already cleaning, repairing, and refueling planes. For the first time, no one complained about the delay. They worked quietly, as if part of something larger than the airline itself. The dawn after the hearings painted the sky in pale amber, the same color as the hydraulic fluid that had nearly cost them all their lives. The irony wasn't lost on Malcolm Reddick as he stood before the Capitol steps, the morning chill settling over his gray suit. Reporters lined the marble walkway, their cameras flashing like the hum of engines before takeoff. He had testified for nearly 5 hours the day before, answering every question from senators, journalists, and regulators with the same calm tone that had silenced a plane full of prejudice. This wasn't about one flight, he had told them. It was about every seat that ever made someone feel small. His voice carried like a promise, and when he finished, there had been silence. No applause, no questions, just quiet understanding. Now standing outside, he breathed in the cold air of accountability. Pinnacle Airlines had officially relaunched its operations under a reformed charter titled the Dignity Protocol Implementation Act, ratified unanimously by the board. For the first time, the company's policies were being cited by federal agencies as a national model for fairness in service industries. What had begun as humiliation 30,000 feet above the ground had become a transformation seen around the world. Inside corporate headquarters, the new Pinnacle emblem, a pair of wings encircling an open hand, had replaced the old one. The company slogan, once above all else, now read, "We rise together." On the tarmac below, rows of aircraft stood waiting, each marked with a small decal, reading, Flight 723, the day we learned to see. Malcolm arrived at the hangar quietly that afternoon, escorted by Jonas Faircroft and Tessa Ward. The hangar smelled of metal, oil, and renewal. Engineers moved like surgeons around the planes, each step purposeful, each motion careful. Jonas briefed him as they walked. "FAA has cleared the entire fleet," he said. "We've passed every inspection. The safety and cultural audits are being integrated into our operating manual." "Good," Malcolm said. "Then we start again." They entered the refurbished aircraft that once carried his humiliation. The interior had been subtly redesigned, no more barriers separating classes, no more curtains, no hidden divisions of privilege masquerading as service tiers. The cabin was open, elegant, balanced, and there at the front left window seat, 3A had been replaced entirely by a bronze plaque embedded into the wall. The engraving was simple, for the man who stayed seated. Malcolm stood before it, his reflection blending with the polished metal, and for a moment he said nothing. The weight of it all, the years. The restraint, the quiet battles fought in rooms where no one listened, folded together into stillness. Tessa watched from a few rows back, tears welling. "We thought we'd surprise you," she said. "Passengers suggested it, employees too. We didn't want anyone else sitting where history sat." Malcolm traced the edge of the plaque with his fingertips. "History doesn't belong to me," he said softly. "It belongs to everyone who learned from it." "Then maybe that's what this means," Tessa replied. Jonas stepped forward, clearing his throat. "So the first official relaunch flight is scheduled for tomorrow. Same route. Chicago to San Francisco." Malcolm smiled faintly. "Seat 3. A retired Jonas said. "Forever?" "Good," Malcolm said. "Some places aren't meant to be occupied again." He turned toward them, his expression calm but resolute. "Every mistake we made came from forgetting the human part of flight. Airplanes don't just carry people, they carry behavior. Every decision inside them echoes what we believe outside them. That's what needs to stay grounded." Jonas nodded, understanding more than he could say. "We'll remember, sir." Malcolm looked at Tessa. "You'll make sure of it." She smiled, the weight of her responsibility both humbling and empowering. "I already started," she said. "First training sessions tomorrow. The new recruits are calling it the 3A program. It's about empathy, not efficiency. Malcolm chuckled softly. Then maybe we're finally learning to fly right. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun gleam across the rows of planes. The air smelled of jet fuel and redemption. Outside, journalists waited again, eager for another quote, another soundbite to turn into headlines. But Malcolm wasn't interested in headlines anymore. He walked past them quietly, offering only one line to a reporter who asked what the legacy of Flight 723 would be. That patience can be louder than power, he said. And sometimes staying seated is how you make the world stand up. The quote spread faster than the original story. Within days, it became etched into social media bios, protest signs, and even school curriculums studying ethics in leadership. The Reddick Standard, some called it the idea that moral authority doesn't shout, it demonstrates. When Pinnacle reopened its routes, passengers noticed the difference instantly. The crew greeted everyone by name. Announcements were spoken with sincerity, not script. The old hierarchy of deference was gone, replaced with a quiet equality that felt revolutionary in its simplicity. On one flight, a young boy asked his mother why everyone clapped when the plane landed. She smiled and said because someone taught them how to fly again. Months later, Malcolm retired from active management, stepping down as chairman, but remaining as honorary founder. His last speech to the board was short. You can measure a company's altitude in profits, he said, but its flight path will always be drawn by how it treats its passengers. He left the room to a standing silence. Not applause, respect. Years passed. Pinnacle grew again, not as the largest airline, but as the most trusted. The bronze plaque in Seat 3A became a symbol visited by employees during training, touched by passengers like a relic of conscience. On its 10th anniversary, a museum display was dedicated to Flight 723 with the words, "He didn't raise his voice, he raised the standard." Malcolm never attended the ceremony. Instead, he sat quietly at his home, overlooking the Pacific, watching a Pinnacle aircraft climb through the clouds. The light caught the wings just right, glowing gold against the horizon. He whispered to himself, "Fly safe, all of you." Behind him on the desk sat a framed copy of the new employee charter signed in his handwriting. At the bottom was a line he'd added the night after the hearings, "Dignity is the only altitude that never falls." The wind off the ocean carried the sound of jets passing overhead, their hum soft and steady like memory. He closed his eyes, and for the first time since that morning on Flight 723, he let himself rest, knowing that the sky no longer belonged to the powerful, but to the just. The end. If this story moved, you make sure to like and subscribe for more stories that hit where it matters. What part of Malcolm's journey hit you the hardest? And where in the world are you watching from? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one of them.